And we're coming back for part 2 of daily number 464, where we learn to be a better gamer. We're looking at this cool contribution by none other than Spainishiwa himself of Spainishiwa versus Hashe. Should have mentioned that in part 1. Sincerest apologies to Spainishiwa and all his awesome fans. Spainishiwa contacted him today to ask about what his experience with the mass queening had been in the last week, and he provided me with this replay as kind of a cool example. And what we've seen thus far is two things at hand. And in one sense, it's been largely just the openings that we've looked at. Spainishiwa having a very clever way to get these 4 queens up early to spread this creep like a madman. I mean, seriously, we're at 9 minutes and look at this creep spread. Getting the roach warren up, not committing to roaches, but getting the preparations just in case, and most significantly of all, an expansion at the third before 6 minutes, because we just didn't get the early larva injects on these hatcheries. We got the creep tumors instead. And likewise, we're seeing a sort of interesting mech opening from Hashe. And anytime you are going up against a Zerg player who takes a fast third, whether you're going Marine Marauder, whether you're going Marine Tank, whether you're going Mech, you can just expand freely as Terran. You can just expand. There's like nothing that the Zerg player can really do about it. He's going to have slow roaches, speedlings, or slow banes. He can't do anything. And in fact, if you watch that epic semifinal or quarterfinal series between IM MVP and IM Nest-T, MVP actually saw Nest-T take a fast third, and MVP double expanded, so he was at 4 bases versus Zergs 3. The game was one-sided. But the big emphasis is that if you're a Terran player, I think that it is really important to virtually always get these fast 2 armories up in order to get those upgrades as maximum as possible. Now, we are seeing Hashe add on 3 factories. It seems like he'll probably be dedicating a large portion to making Thors and tanks and all that good jazz, but I want to emphasize that the core part is going to be just 1 factory with reactor and 1 factory with tech lab. Often it's very difficult to get this 3rd factory up, let alone the 4th. We're a little lucky in Hashe's position in that we are capable of getting this unusually fast 3rd, but that's not the big focus. So in this position, I'm going to come back to the Spainishiwa camp, and we're going to do kind of a similar thing for the first half of this part number 2. Is we're going to look at the mid game for Hashe, or excuse me, for Spainishiwa at a little bit higher of a speed. I'm going to come back so I have my timer open. Excellent. So Spainishiwa, we're going to look at his mid game for a little bit, and then we're going to pop back over and look at Hashe's mid game. So that way we can look at both the queen consideration and the mech consideration. Right now, all that we really have seen thus far is this Banshee and some Hellions. But notice how much the creep spread helps this out. We can spot these Banshees coming in from a mile away. And in fact, as we're going for this sluggish Queen Roach army, sluggish because it's really bad off creep, we see that one of the first upgrades that we get with our layer is the Overlord Speed upgrade. I think this is very impressive, this kind of decision making. Taking our 3rd up, but we can get this Overlord control lockdown of the entire map. Queen still spreading creep, and we only have 5 queens. I mean, we have 4 hatches. We have queens doing all sorts of injects at the main and the natural, but we got 4 really fast and only added on 1 more. This creep spread is not because we had lots of queen, it's because we had queens started early on. So now in this particular situation, we can see that this creep spread acts quite a lot like an early warning system. If we start to see stuff moving out, we have a lot of hatches up and ready and available. As we can see with all this, we have all this stuff up. And if we see the push coming, we can respond. In a sense, this early 4th hatchery from Spainishiwa is quite a defensive play. Have you ever seen a Protoss player get like 10 warp gates and then not build out of them? And whenever he sees a drop, he just warps in the back of his main and then he's safe. Zergs can function a lot the same way. DRG does this quite a lot, where he'll get hatcheries really early on and then build no units because if he sees his opponent coming, he can very flexibly flood out with 3 sets of hatcheries instead of 2, or 4 instead of 3. And then following this up, I can tell you right off the bat, Spanishiwa is going to be getting really ultra fast hive tech up. I'm just going to tell you this player's meching. I'm telling you this player is going to be going for Broodlord, Infester, and all this stuff. But right now, we're doing a lot of preparation without committal. We are getting roach speed quite quickly. Obviously, 1-1 upgrades is great for a Ling Infester mixture, but you know what? We'd like to build no Lings at any point ever. We would love to just go straight for that hive and go straight for the Broodlord Infester mixture, but we don't know if he opened up Hellion Banshee and is now going to be going mass Marine Marauder tank. We don't know that. We might want Ling Infester. We don't know if he's going to be going for mass Hellion off 2 reactor factories. We just don't know these things quite yet. So we're just getting these. Well, actually, it would be stupid for him to be massing that many Hellions, but still, the broad thing that we don't know is if he's going Marine tank, Marine Marauder medevac, or if he's going for Mech. But this is really cool preparations. There's a good amount of larva right here that is idle. We could spend more larva, and we probably should be spending just a slight bit more, but leaving some of this open and doing some checks at this critical phase in the game. Right around 12 to 14, there tends to be some big attacks. So if you can get here and you can kind of examine and go, okay, is he going to be attacking or not? Is this a yes or no? And then you can sort of rejudge slightly later on. So what we're seeing Spanishiwa do is get the pathogen glands, getting the hive up right away, literally as fast as humanly possible. And at this point in time, he has the Overseer that gets in there. He has seen Mech. He's seen everything. He actually saw this third a while back. Let me actually come to... Yep. Right as he got the Overlord speed, just went ahead and checked in here. And remember when I was saying, well, he's probably spending a little bit more larva. This is right around the 12-minute mark, when he has a lot of larva, wants to check in here. Oh, look at this. He's going for a fast third. If I walked in here and I saw no third, this is immediately when I would make a lot of Roach Ling. I would get the pathogen glands, and I'd make absolutely certain to churn out some infestors. This is a really key moment. Generally around the 11 to 13 mark, knowing if your opponent has a third up as Zerg, literally 11 to 13 minutes, like in that time frame. If you see no third, you should start to go, oh, he's probably going to be doing something. And if you're at like 13 or 14 and he just hasn't taken his third yet, that's when it's like, oh my god, I need to be like really ready for an attack. Either that or you're dead already. So this moment is so critical. Actually, I'm a little surprised that it took this long, but if my opponent's opening Hellion Banshee, it's very difficult for him to do a big mid-game push. Just really, really difficult, because, geez, he doesn't have a factory with a tech lab yet, and he's likely really low on Marine count, so that's going to put him behind a lot. But I don't mind that right at the 12-minute, a lot of larva was left over. So here comes Spanishiwa darting in, sees all the factories for the first time ever, losing a lot of the stuff in the middle, but really just doesn't have to build a lot of stuff at this point in time. Building a lot of queens. There's the 10 infestors coming out. See those larvae that's still left over? Cool. We don't really want to, like, make Zerglings, which can't break this at all, which could not ever dream of dealing damage to this force at all. We don't really want to make the Zerglings. If we get attacked with a small force, we will if we have to. But I think that's quite brilliant by Spanishiwa. This leave openature. And now we can begin adding on our queens. So this is going to become the interesting trade-off for queens in the late game. We want to get mass queen because it's good for transfuse. So when the hell do we get those? Well, it used to be a trade-off of larva, like do I spend larva on drones or larva on units, but in the late game it's now money. We left all the larva open in case there was going to be a mid-game push, And we left the money open in case we needed to spend it. But now that we're at this phase, now we're actually going to be downing the money on those queens. And we see the queens just massively queued up. Overlords everywhere. And I think Spanicia was doing a very smart move of just expanding to all the opposite corners of the map. And this is something I've seen Spanicia experiment around with. He gets this Nidus network kind of stuff up, but not for big worms in the main, but instead for, you know, like a worm over here. So that way, if the push begins to work up this way, or if the push works over this way, he can just load up all the drones for a fast retreat. So now I want to briefly come back to around the 10-minute mark and just briefly... actually, Terran point of view is pretty simple. Oh, my frames! My frames! Oh, my beautiful frames are dropping! Oh! We're gonna wait for my frames to come back. Come back, frames. You know what? I do know that the audio... Yeah, the audio seems to be going out just fine. And of course, if you can hear the audio, just type banana and it'll be all fine. But the... let's see, what would be important to discuss at this point in time? I'm going to go ahead and put up my still screen. I'm going to put up my still screen at this point in time. Yeah, the, no, I guess I'm going to, yeah, I'll leave my face here so I can represent my big Zerg symbol. The big thing that I would note about the Zerg aspect is certainly that 11 to 14 minute mark in time. I think that if you're up against a kind of standard player, who's going for that Marine Marauderish kind of style, then it's pretty typical to not stockpile up that much larva just because he's naturally being aggressive at you. But the big theme of the daily is, of this daily, is preparation without committal. We want to be able to prepare for what he could possibly do, but we don't want to commit all out, balls out to just defending Mech to the max and then he's going Marine Marauder. And this, I think, is the big issue that ends up plaguing a lot of players who are now dealing with this, oh my god, is he going Marine Marauder or is he going Mech? It feels like you have to go for one or the other, and making sure you have these very regularly scheduled checks and that you know your timings well just helps a lot. So I've just gone ahead and lost 3,500 frames, which is going to be about 90 seconds. It generally stops as we get close to 4,000. Excellent, 3772, and we're back. So you should be retrieving frames. Sincerest apologies for the video drop, but thank God I have a juicy baritone. Let's go ahead and come back to the game and examine some of this. And just to make sure that everything's okay, if you could type Kiwi if everything's looking good. Dear archive viewers, this is how we roll. So also, I want to note that at this point in the game, look at how low our money is. It just got under 1,000. I know 1,000 isn't ideal, but as we come back to just the 12 minute mark, aha. Remember the 12-minute mark? This is where we started to stockpile up all this larva, and we had all this money in the bank. Oh my goodness, look at our money, it's over 2K, because we're trying to make sure that he's not doing anything. But during this period, we stockpiled all the money just in case. But here, from here, our money's low because we've just dumped it all into these 10 queens, and in production we have 4 more queens en route. Really cool. Really cool. Would not have been able to get those queens otherwise. So now, as we're up against a meching player, we want to exploit his mobility as much as possible. Everyone says Mech is immobile. Oh yeah, it's immobile, the most immobile force anywhere, but then they don't adjust. You know how you adjust to an immobile player? Expanding to opposite corners of the map, getting Nidus worms linked at your expansion. So that way, when they commit huge to an attack, oopsie daisies, so that way when they commit huge to an attack at this base, they bring all their units here, and then you just load up with all your drones and retreat, and they kill 350 worth of minerals. So, now we're starting to build up this extra deadly force, and I can tell you at this point, we are now seeing Hashe's primary goal, or excuse me, Spanishiwa's primary goal this entire game long, which is to get up this Queen, Infestor, Broodlord force. We're going to see it in action in part number 3. But what I wanted to do was to stop back and go to the Hashe side of things and get the last 8 minutes from his point of view as we can re-examine this meching thing. Again, we're going to see a lot of preparations without committal. So we get the map control. We do indeed have all this stuff. This is just kind of standard Terran preparations, doing the wall-offs, controlling the watchtower, seeing this sort of thing. That incoming jazz. And because we see our opponent with a fast third, we saw it with a Banshee just now, but we saw it several minutes ago with the Hellions. We just went ahead and took the third and went for the double armory. Very smart. Our goal is going to be to push between 160 and maxed food. That's going to be our killer mega force. We're going to harass with the Banshees as much as possible, abating creep spread, doing damage to expos, working together with our Hellions to pick off queens. But keep in mind, queens are just super duper good, and with a couple of roaches, we just are forced to pop back. This is not a big deal. Also, we want to continue to add Banshees on all game long. We really love our Banshee count. 10 minutes is the time that Mutalisk can come on 2 bases. 12 to 14 minutes is when they can come on 3 bases. So we're fine right now getting these Thors now. I mean, Thors do take a full minute to build, but if we start them a little bit later, that's fine. You can actually start the Thors at 12 minutes and still be okay if you have the engineering bay coming. So, at this point, it's pretty typical looking stuff. Just building mostly Thors and some tanks, never going overboard on the tanks. The Banshees serve as an amazing roach killer. For everything else, you have Hellions and Thors. There's nothing really that the tank is super needed against except Hellions. And also, let's think about that statement that we have no mobility. We are not a mobile force. What does this mean? Well, if we're not mobile, we probably can't be doing a lot of small attacks because we don't have the choice to move back. We need to wait for bigger attacks. We should expand close to us. We should expand along the direction of the attack. If we're taking expansions, taking an expansion here is pretty dangerous. It's really far away. If we're taking an expand here, where should we be attacking? Well, we should be attacking to the right and then up. Because envision a huge force here. Notice how if we have a huge force here, we're protected along that side. If we expand, or if we wanted to attack up here, we should be expanding onto this side. Or if we want to attack up here, we probably shouldn't be doing a slow siege up on this side. We should try to hit it unsieged because we know we need to pull back to this expansion. Also, now that we know that we're slow and we're doing these big long-term pushes, we should focus more on upgrading. Upgrades are more critical to us because if we're doing an attack later, we need to do everything that will help that attack later. So there it is. This is actually one of the reasons why Terran players against Zerg don't go for ultra early upgrades generally, because they need to do some sort of damage now. So for instance, if I'm going for a Marine Marauder force, I'll generally get Combat Shield, or Stim, or both, before getting upgrades really cranked into high gear with 2 engineering base, because I need to focus that gas on doing damage now. But with Mech, everything I'm doing is focused on the later, so that needs to be that. Cool. Cool. And of course, throughout this, the big pressure that we're putting on is the Banshees. An interesting decision that Hashe's putting on is the addition of Ravens very early on, and I'll largely point to the Seeker missile that we'll see kick into action, but didn't kick into action quite early enough in this game. And also, if we're low on mobility, we want to be spending a lot of our mineral on orbital commands so we have enough to be able to scan. If we're going for the late game, what's another thing that helps us later? Having very little supply in SCVs and having more in these units. Cool, so I want to have extra orbital commands so I can mule up instead of having the SCV count. So it's not unusual to see a meching player at around 55 SCVs. Whoa, that's low. Yeah, but we have 6 or 7 orbital commands on 3 to 4 bases. So we just mule like crazy. And also with those 7 orbital commands, we can do these scans. Sensor towers are also critically important. all part of the
Add-on
preparations.
complete.
And I see a lot of people typing all the mules, go crazy with mules. So this is one thing that's nice about having all these banshees, is that we can spot expansions. Hashe actually spotted the expansion. He's going to wait until this expansion's done and then go kill it. But of course, Spanish was a little bit too good and saw the banshees. Canceled it. And I would say that it's probably 90% of games you'll see the Terran player taking his fourth as he's going for his expand. Also, the Corvid reactor, it's a family of ravens I found out recently. So that's really coolly named. But before any push, I would say it's pretty important to know if he's going for Hive or not. And if he is going for Hive, this is where I think it's super important to start massing up the ravens. In this new metagame. In this new metagame shift. Almost always, actually let's talk about Marine Marauder Tank Medevac. Or more commonly, Marine Tank Medevac. If you see a Zerg player going for Hive, you're going to be expecting Infestor Broodlord. Or you were to be expecting Infestor Broodlord. So, what you would do is you would start getting Vikings and some Thors. TSL Polt is an amazing example of this. There were some dailies that we did between him and Stefano where he'd just get like so many freaking Marauders and tanks unsiege and just blast all the Infestors apart. And then the Marine Thor Viking would just rip up the Broodlords. But now, Queens are thrown into the mix. Now Queens are suddenly a huge component of this mixture. So, we just can't actually kill the Broodlords because there's too much transfuse. This is where the Raven Seeker Missile comes into play, and we saw this a little bit in the last Shadow Terran vs. Zerg we ended up watching a little while back, where we watched Mech play against a Zerg, where you can just rip apart a gigantic army instantly, and Broodlord Infestor Queen is, and I hate to use this word, hard countered by the Seeker Missile. So actually I'm not going to use it. It's just really, 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 really good. It's good, damn it. Screw the term hard counter. I hate definitions, buzzwords, all that jazz. I hate it. I hate it. Let me give you an example. In business, there's this term called value proposition. Can't handle it, man. Can't handle it. If one more person comes up to me and says, listen, here's the value proposition I have for you, and what now see the value proposition that Google is serving, I will literally stab myself in the face in front of that person and just be like, stop saying it. Value proposition. You know what that means, the value proposition? It's what's actually good about it. Apple sells very well designed products. The value proposition on Apple's behalf is the... And of course, my lifelong goal is to try to eliminate counter from people's thought process, because counter is almost irrelevant. It's like useful to sort of explain to someone who doesn't get StarCraft, you know? Like, no one cares. No one's heard value proposition in real life. Everyone's like, what is he talking about? What is he referring to? No one, not a soul. No one. Everyone in my chat plays video games. Damn it. Crap. Crud. And now I see people making jokes about rock, paper, seeker missile. Oh. Listen. The seeker missile... If you say something like hard counters, let me explain the issue with hard counter. Look, just fucking listen to me, okay? Here's the problem I have with a term like hard counter. It doesn't actually say why it's good in that particular circumstance. It rushes to the what and ignores why altogether. And my God, in the Day 9 Daily, we try to learn why. Because that means that when we watch video games, we watch esports, and we see why, we can go, excitement and anticipation. It makes the entire experience more freaking fun, and that's all we really care about at the end of the day is maximum fun. So, Why is the Seeker Missile so good against it? The Seeker Missile has the largest blast radius of anything in the entire game. And it does maximum damage to every hex in that blast radius except the very, very tippy corners of the big square. So, it's good against things that are really, really clustered. It also does 125 damage. Why does this make it not so good against Zerglings? Well, 35 damage to a Zergling, 125 damage total. Wow, that's a lot of damage and overkill. It's 90 damage that just goes nowhere. So that's kind of a waste. Against Mutalisks, well, I guess that's pretty reasonable, but they're pretty fast. They're generally not as clustered. You can run away from the Seeker Missile pretty nicely and just sort of pick the important one out. It's not like Irradiate in StarCraft 1. And honestly, at that phase in the game, you're not ever really going to have that many Ravens for the circumstance. But against this Infestor Broodlord combo, you have slow units that are expensive and clustered. It's perfect. It's perfect! It's like the most perfect answer ever. So literally going Raven, Hellion, Thor has become a really nice late game mix. This single one lone Hellion is largely for creep spread. So you see Hashe moving out to mid-map, and now he's trying to take this expansion. You see this cut to the right? I love this. I love this cut to the right. This expansion is going to be super duper well defended. And more command centers. So, we do a little bit of spreading action. We're being very, very cautious. And this is where I love things like this Hellion here to help defend this down path.
Upgrade complete.
This little lightning push up here to possibly take this out. And where do we go after this? There's nothing wrong with pulling right back. Look at this. Scan, scan. Seeing this. Oh, shit. Oh, shit. Ooh, Infestor Broodlord time. We're going to take a look at what that Infestor Broodlord combo can do when we go into part 3, right after this.